Unstoppable power in every situation, faster than everything else, but at what cost, and is it right for you? Well, in this video, we're going to discuss what you should know before buying an SNS 124 crate twin cam engine. Let's get into it. Alright, what's going on YouTube? FXDLS Brooklyn is back in the building. Let's begin with a brief startup just so you could get a sense of what this thing sounds like. So it was about 2 years ago when I was at the end of the line with my 110 Screaming Eagle twin cam engine. I could have once again stayed with the 110 factory motor, which got me around 50,000 fast, reliable, and hard miles. Or I could have jumped into the middle ground with the Screaming Eagle 117, something that was more aggressive, yet not as crazy as a full SNS crate engine. And then finally, there was the option for the final frontier, which for me was an SNS 124 motor. It would be rare when I would come across this engine in the wild, but whenever I did, I always admired the sound and the sheer performance that would come from somebody running this engine in their bike. And also, just how great this engine looked aesthetically. I mean, the damn thing was pretty near a work of art with how clean cut it was. So anyway, I knew I wanted to hold on to my Dyna FXDLS for life, so if I was ever going to make the serious investment of an engine like this, it would definitely be in what I consider a lifelong bike for me. So when I made this decision, I kind of felt like I was taking a leap of faith, as there was never and still is not a lot of content specifically about this crate engine. I had heard rumors going in both directions, and I knew I had to see for myself if I was ever going to know for sure. So if you're in the position I was in years ago, or you're just curious, well, this video is for you. So at this point, I'm well over 10,000 miles with this engine, and here's the short of it. It is by far the loudest, fastest, and most rowdy twin cam I have ever ridden. My first days with this engine, I realized I couldn't ride it like my 110 anymore, as I found myself pulling up the front wheel without even meaning to. And in terms of dyno numbers, well, after paying a visit to the dynocologist in Long Island, he was able to pull 130 horsepower as well as 140 torque out of this high compression beast. I could feel every ounce of that power in literally every situation, from a startup to an idle to riding light to highway miles. In every situation, there is immediate and inexhaustible power behind the smallest crack of the throttle. Most notably is when I found myself doing highway speeds. The immediate power that could be found even in those higher gears and speeds still puts a smile on my face even 10,000 miles later. So yeah, having the insane power and all of the rowdiness that comes with this engine, my first impressions were very good. However, I knew I wouldn't be able to give it a true and honest review until I put it to the true test, which for me is doing long distance bike trips. A lot of my friends whose opinions I hold in high regard actually tried to talk me out of going with this engine for that exact reasoning, saying that for my riding style of pushing bikes to the limit in terms of heavy mileage bike trips, I would want something less radical and more reliable. They told me that this engine wouldn't be practical for stacking miles and would definitely inevitably fail me when I had to ride it in situations that contained extreme heat. So with that being said, my most recent summer bike trip, where we would be battling through thousands of miles through a southern heat wave, was very much a true test for this engine. I kept my expectations realistic, and honestly, I thought if there was going to be a breakdown on this trip, it was probably going to be for my bike with this new radical engine build. But to my surprise, it was actually the complete opposite. Through over 4,000 miles of a southern heat wave, I was blown away at how phenomenally this engine performed for me. Many people told me that this engine wouldn't want to sit on hundreds of highway miles day by day, but I actually found that this engine really thrived on those fast highway miles, specifically in situations where the speed limit would be, say, 80 miles per hour. Sitting on these fast speeds all day felt like not much of a stressor at all for this bigger engine, and rarely would I be tapping into 4,000 RPMs. With my other bikes with smaller engines, such as my 88 cubic inch FXDX, you could definitely feel that a bike like that is not going to be happy holding fast highway speeds all day with no brakes. Don't get me wrong, it'll do it, but it's definitely putting a stress on the bike. So yeah, I can't be any more clear. This engine is actually really good for someone who does put in heavy highway mileage for that reason. The other thing I was surprised to find was that I was somehow able to get more miles out of a given tank of gas than my previous 110 engine. Again, this could also be because it was finally professionally tuned, but surprising nonetheless. So if anything was going to go wrong on this bike trip that I was talking about, it was the day where we had to battle through about 3 hours of hellish Chicago traffic through a heat wave. If there was a time where this bike was going to break down or overheat, it would have been then, but it got through it with absolutely no issues. Finally, my friend Kevin was also with me running the same engine in the same bike, and him and I both agreed that we were very surprised with how well this engine performed on a challenging bike trip. So who do I recommend this engine for? Well, for me, it flawlessly has handled the two most challenging situations I generally find myself throwing my bikes into, which is a mix of New York City chaos as well as heavy bike trip miles. This engine is for someone whose default riding style is fast. But beyond just being fast and rowdy, the biggest sell of this engine is the hairpin responsiveness of explosive power that can be found and accessed at any speed, any gear, any situation. The engine sounds like nothing else, and the first thing you're probably going to want to invest in is a pair of quality earplugs. For the 10,000 initial miles for me, this engine proved reliable and fun, and I'm looking forward to many more. Finally, most of the big things that can go wrong will go wrong early in the game, and I like how S&S acknowledges that and provides a year-long warranty on this engine, which definitely eased my mind going into it years ago. Alright, so all of this sounds well and good, right? But at what cost, do you say? Well, to get started, the engine itself is coming in just above $8,500. Oh, and let me tell you, there's some things you're going to have to change up in your bike before you even think about running this type of power. Yeah, it's a serious job to run this engine. I put stars next to a few of these items that you might be able to get away with initially without, but I've found in my experience that it really does pay to upgrade these things in the long run. So anyway, take all these additional things you're going to have to upgrade on your bike, and also considering the hours of labor you're going to have to pay for if you're not doing this install yourself. And at this point, you're basically spending the money of buying a new bike. So I would say if saving your money is a priority here, you should probably just keep walking, because like most things true high performance, it just ain't cheap. Like I said, in my situation, it was a combination of the fact that I had completely cooked my previous engine, as well as knowing that I was going to be putting this work into a bike that I would be holding onto forever. And for those two reasons, the idea of running this engine just made sense for me. And seeing how it's performed for me 10,000 miles later, I could hands down tell you it was worth it. So now in terms of any issues that I've had or anything that's gone wrong, well, when you run this level of rowdiness, things eventually come loose and things eventually break, especially if they're not reinforced. So the only issues I've had so far was breaking the bracket that held my oil cooler on during a bike trip that we did in the spring. Good thing I caught it when it happened, because if we would have broke those lines, it would have been a serious issue. But anyway, I actually sent a reinforced bracket that I've not had any issues with since. The only other thing was I had completely chewed through my rear motor mount from Big Bear Choppers. I hit them up about it, and they actually told me it would be better to run stock Harley motor mounts for this, which I've long since done, and I've had no issues after that. So besides those two things, I've had zero issues running this engine over 10,000 miles. So in conclusion, for a long distance mile crusher who needs to do the bike trips while also having to navigate challenging riding environments such as New York City, this engine has completely surpassed my expectations. If you're somebody who's looking for true power within the twin cam platform, look no further than the S&S 124 crate engine. As always, if you have any questions, the comment section is always open. If you enjoyed this one, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We also have a Patreon for some deeper cuts and quests. Whether you're slinging the real power this season or still rocking that stock motor, stay safe and stay low, practice a positive mental attitude, prioritize performance on your motorcycle, and on that, FXDLS Brooklyn is out.